Well, we've got a jam-packed discussion here, so we're going to get started. I see our virtual room filling up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Jordan Stein, and I lead public affairs here at EdSights. And one of the things at EdSights that we are so proud and so excited to do, in addition to working on continuing to build our technologies and platforms to help institutions better support their students, is bring together dialogues like this one, where we have folks from government, from the educational sector, public, private, all of the above, to really talk about what matters here, which is a student-centered, student-focused higher education system. So I want to introduce our panelists today, and we've got an outstanding group. First joining us is Representative Jeremy Gray, who's an elected member of the Alabama State Legislature. We've got Dr. Tim King, who's the Vice Provost for Student Success at Jacksonville State University and a valued and great EdSights partner. We have Dr. Rhonda Gaede, who is the Associate Provost for Undergraduate Education at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. We have Dr. Catherine Wehlburg, who is the president of Athens State University. And last but most certainly not least, we're joined by Carolina Recchi, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of EdSights. So really excited to have a lot of different perspectives represented today from government, from higher education, and from institutions of all shapes and sizes. Our theme today that we really want to kind of focus our discussion on is how can Alabama become the national model for student success? And we want to lay out just a couple of points of context that are no doubt very familiar to our panelists and a lot of members of our audience. Alabama has a bunch of unique dynamics, right? There is a very strong community college system and a lot of emphasis on workforce development. There have been significant investments made across the state in dual enrollment, right? So the capacity for students to earn high school and college credit at the same time. There is a statewide focus on credential attainment and retaining talent through initiatives like All in Alabama. And we have a mix of flagship universities, regional institutions, HBCUs, and community college. So I want to kind of go across our panel here from our Alabama higher education leaders and Representative Gray to give kind of a quick initial answer here. When you think about Alabama higher education 5 years from now, what gives you the most optimism and what keeps you up at night? We'll start with you, Representative Gray, from a government public official perspective.
Yeah, I think, thank you for having me first, Jordan. But I think a lot of things that you name, and before, I think people used to be in silos. The government did one thing, K-12 did another thing. You had community college universities all doing one particular thing in their own silo. And I think that we understand that the economic driver for anything is retention, making sure that you look at things from, we say looking at things from third grade to hard hat. So just looking even at third grade, what are they doing at third grade? What industries will be available in 20 years and making sure that us as a state, we're doing that on the K through 12 level, community college level, university level, because, there are things that are coming like AI and quantum, and they're going to create new jobs. So what are we doing to make sure that we're aligned with those jobs as well? Because we do know students, young people want jobs that are flexible. They want jobs that are creative to get them to be able to think outside of the box. And the jobs that are old, they're still prevalent in some areas, but how do you get young people into those jobs? So you have to kind of reinvent the wheels in a way to make sure that you can find industry that, is more applicable to them. What kind of keep me up at night, I would say, still making sure that, everyone has opportunity when you talk about zip code, income, making sure that, people are not overwhelmed, trying to attain, higher education in some degree. But when you have to worry about things like childcare and transportation and housing and mental health and things of that nature. And the one other thing that, kind of keep me up at night, I would say that I think we're doing a great job when you talk about education to economic development and workforce. But I don't want us to get so much in the return on investment that we overlook some majors like liberal arts, right? We still need thinkers, right? We still need the people who are visionaries and can think outside of the box. So I think that's the thing that really keeps me up at night.
Thank you, Representative Gray. I want to bring you in here, Dr. Wehlberg. kind of as an entry point to our discussion today, thinking in the midterm future, what keeps you most optimistic? What keeps you up at night?
Well, thank you for having me here, and hello to everyone. I think that there are so many things about higher education that make me feel very optimistic. And one of the things that some of you may not know is that Athens State University is one of only two institutions in the country that focus on transfer students and adult learners. And I think that optimism of what we are doing and what we are able to provide to students across the state and beyond, who need that flexibility and need that access, because they are also employees, and they are working, and they have families, and all of those kinds of things. That to me it makes me feel very excited about the future of higher education and what we're doing to help support students who have some college but no credential. One of the things that I think keeps me up at night is really that I get concerned sometimes because we are focusing on completion and credit collection rather than on actual learning and problem solving and the things that higher education is known for. And I think that it's really important that we keep focused on our learning outcomes and not just on, did you take the right classes to check them off on a sheet of paper so that you can get a diploma. Getting that diploma is wonderful and very exciting and really, really important. But we've got to make sure that we ensure that our students are learning what they need to learn, and are able to come out as better thinkers, better problem solvers, and better citizens in the country.
Thank you, Dr. Wehlburg. Dr. Gaede, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in here on this question we've been talking through the panel here.
All right. Well, from our campus, we can see the Saturn V rocket, and it's a good reminder to us of what a nation, what a people can do when they come together. So I think that given the right environment, that we can be successful in higher education because we know how to get things done. We are, to piggyback on Dr. Wehlberg, we are looking at our general education because we are thinking about how we can build those great citizens, and that's something we're going to be doing, and that's an exciting effort going on. What might keep me up at night is the non-consumption, the notion that there's not value in higher education. There's value in all work and all trades, but we need to keep people looking at all of their options.
Thank you. And Dr. King, I'm gonna give you a little bit of a tougher question than some of others. You're
Thanks.
someone who, yeah, friend of EdSights. You are someone who is in the student success space, right? So I think what I want to kind of ask you here is today's student, and this is something that Representative Gray hit on in a very specific and substantive way. They're increasingly balancing things like work, caregiving, financial pressures, mental health challenges alongside school. How should institutions, Jacksonville State and others, rethink the traditional college experience to reflect those realities?
Mm. Well, if you got to rethink uh, what those students look like and the things that they're running into as students uh, today. So, traditionally, I mean, for everyone that's on this panel, um, we more than likely attended college as a full-time student, lived on campus, and you know ran through the normal phase of the college experience, and that's no longer the case. I never worked in college, not once. Now I know some people did who were my age, but I did not. That's not because I come from a wealthy family. It's because at the time, um, my college was paid for through some a scholarship that I received. Now that may be true for a few students nowadays, but the cost of living on campus, the cost of living at home, the food, all these different factors. There's so many variables that come into play. It's very complex. It's easy for us who have been in higher ed 20, 30 years to lose sight of all of these different types of variables that come into play. So I'm a firm believer that we need to create systems that respond to types of students we see. I always tell this to my team. I preach this to the faculty as well. We serve the students we have, not the students we want. We want students to be like we were, but they're not that way anymore. So going back to what Representative Gray said, there are mental health challenges. Now we're heavy users of EdSight, and we review the dashboard on a daily basis. For the past, I don't know how many years we've had it, Carolina, I think since 2019, 2020, engagement is always number one risk factor reported by student. You would think it would be financial or academic or wellness, which is the other risk driver, but it's always engagement. What does that entail? It entails students maybe not feeling as if they're connecting to our campus, to us, feeling that they have a purpose. Why are they here? So for me and for my team, I think every campus there are best practices that work, and then there are organic practices, services, programs that each campus, UAH, Athens, that Dr. Warburg mentioned, have to create and develop to serve our population. We can't just pick and choose things that have been used throughout the history of higher ed. We have to get creative. One of the things that's going on here at Jack State right now is very, very focused on workforce, regional economic types of programs. We have an aviation program starting this fall, a strong forensic investigation program that's rapidly expanding, respiratory therapy program, which I don't think many people have ever heard of anything like that. Um, Speech pathology is something that we're doing now. So I could go on and on and on. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but those are the types of things that we've reached into, and what we have to do as higher ed professionals is make sure we're getting that feedback. Focus groups. We do a lot of focus groups with students to make sure we are hearing the types of things that they need in adjusting. We do the same thing with employer. We've got to get them ready to work. Instead of producing degrees, we are producing people ready to work the moment they get out of here.
Thank you so much, Dr. King.
Sure.
No,
You're welcome.
thank you so much, Dr. King. And I think whether you intended to or not, you kind of gave me an excellent segue into a subject that I really want to get to, in the context of keeping this discussion really focused on Alabama and what makes it unique in terms of its identity, its DNA, and its focus, right? And that's something around workforce opportunity. Representative Gray, I want to bring you in here. Alabama has invested heavily in workforce development and credential attainment, right? You brought this up in your first comments. What I want to kind of have you weigh in here on is how should policymakers like yourself be thinking about student success, not just as an education issue, but as an economic development strategy, right? You ultimately have this system, right? But my guess, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that you want talent once they graduate to stay in the state and work in the state and grow in the state. So curious your perspective here.
Yeah, I think that we're already doing a job. When we started the Department of Workforce with Secretary Reed, that's one reason that he was kind of picked to be in that position. Former state senator, understood the policy side, but he understood he's trying to bring the workforce side and the education side together. And so I think that we're going in the right direction. So when you think about credentialing or degrees, those are jobs, right? Whether it's, a nurse in a hospital or an engineer in a manufacturing plant or an entrepreneur that's opened up in a business or a teacher in the classroom, those are things that are the talent pipeline to actually fill those jobs. what we struggle with the most, and I think just from a, state in general, is the retention. How do we keep how do we keep students here? How do we find the income level that they need? How do we find the things that they like to do, like recreation, walkable communities, like all of these things, the food that they eat? And so it's really around about how do we create an experience that the student that graduates wants to stay in Alabama? And I think that's something that we've been looking at. I know that's something that Innovate Alabama has been looking at through a 100-page report that they did around, like, building up recreation and ways to be more effective in talent retention. But I think that's our biggest problem. I think we understand from an education policy and an economic development policy, but the retention is what we have to focus on.
Thank you, Representative Gray. And I want to go to first Dr. Wehlburg, then Dr. Gaede on this question, right? Dr. King brought up in his last comments all of the different occupational kind of divisions that Jacksonville State's kind of developing and enrolling fields of study for, right? So what I want to ask you, Dr. Wehlberg, first is, how has your institution changed because of the fact that employers' expectations have changed?
We have been very responsive to some of our employer and industry partners. We've actually created a learning partnership program where we work directly with industry, corporate, and other partners to first of all, we offer a discount to their employees and the employees' families to come and get an education with us. But that also gives us entree into the industry so that we can have questions and get answers for that. So what do they need? What training? What are their employees coming in lacking? What are new trends that are showing up in that particular industry that we might be able to help support? So we've really created this partnership across many different agencies and industries where we are getting real information from the ground today as to what is needed and what we can do. And so because of that, we've added several micro-credentials and certificate programs. We have some new courses coming out on AI and AI management and advanced manufacturing and other kinds of areas that is in direct response to what our employers are telling us that they need to have. So that's one of the things that we're doing to make sure that we are offering what is needed and what is valued, not just what we have always offered.
Dr. Gaede, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in on this question as well.
Sure. UAH has had a long history of experiential learning because of our preponderance of degrees in engineering and science and the dynamic community that Huntsville is with aerospace and other industries. We have long been listening to our partners. One of the things that we've done in response to advanced manufacturing and other things is the creation recently of an engineering technology degree. So these are people that want to work in the engineering space, but maybe not quite in the theoretical ways that people have done in the past. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that 70% of our alumni stay in the North Alabama area. So we are retaining students.
Thank you, Dr. Gaede. Before we get into our next kind of thematic area, I want to just reiterate to our audience here, as you may have questions of your own for our panelists, please feel free to insert those questions, type them into the chat, and I'll be sure to get to those in the context of our discussion today. But with that, I want to move into an area that is near and dear to the heart, no doubt, of everyone on our panel today, of this idea of how we support students, and to put this sort of Alabama flavor on it. Dual enrollment, as we mentioned at the top today, continues to grow rapidly in the state and has become a significant part of the higher education pipeline, with policymakers and institutions viewing it as an important pathway to college completion. Dr. King, when we kind of first gathered as a group before going live today, you talked about how you're in the thick of orientation right now on your campus. So sort of probably a good time to get your perspective on this. Are we doing
No,
enough to support students before they arrive on campus?
no, absolutely not. And it's funny you asked that because had this conversation last week with the provost and the president about I'm creating a position for one of my current employees who is pursuing a doctorate in education, and we're going to place her in various high schools in our area to come up with preparation type programs to make sure the transition is a lot easier, up to and including dual enrollment, students who are in dual enrollment. We have, so last year, our dual enrollment population was around 1,800 students. It's a lot. And it's fantastic. It's great. And we support it. We love it. But we need to make sure that they are ready, it, not just the academic piece. There's a lot of different things that happen. So yeah, we in fact, kind of put through the questions through AI to get some feedback, and it came up with what I'm already thinking. So that kind of affirms that we need to be in the schools. We need to be preparing our students as much as we can. Now, look, there have been federal programs available since the early, 1960s, or TRIO programs. I'm sure you've all heard of TRIO. TRIO can't cover everything, though. There's just not enough money to go around. So we need to do more to make sure those students who want to come to college have an opportunity to work with someone who is at the college or has that knowledge base to prepare them. And it because we hear from faculty, and I'm sure Dr. Gaede and Dr. Wehlburg hear this too, is that students aren't prepared for this or that. They said the same thing about me 40 years ago when I was a freshman. Okay, so that hasn't really changed, but we need to do our best to address it.
Thank you, Dr. King. Carolina, I want
Sure.
to bring you in here because I know that kind of the topic of student support on an overarching level is something that's of great passion near and dear to your heart. From your work with hundreds of campuses, both in Alabama and across the country, where have you seen institutions kind of have the most success in this way from that sort of early entry point when students first make their way onto campuses and even slightly before?
Yeah. Well, I do think the institutions that are making the most progress are the ones that are, that are not waiting for policy change. And I can definitely say all three institutions on this call are in that group. Um, what we've heard is pretty clear. Like students have a very diverse set of needs, and the role of higher ed has shifted from kind of teaching and the classroom experience to kind of supporting the life experience of the whole student. And that's a very different role. And I would argue in an age of AI, probably a more important role and a bigger differentiator in terms of like what we're providing to the student. But it also means that it's less focused. And I think that's really hard for higher ed. Like you have food insecurity, transportation, childcare, mental health, tutoring, like all of these things that your students are struggling with. And obviously, policy change can have the broader scale impact, but you still have to address these challenges in some sort of order. And so I think the institutions that are doing it the best are the ones that are identifying like what are the biggest pain points for our students, or if we're thinking about kind of early college students, like what are their biggest needs. And I think just listening to the student directly and asking them in a way, obviously we do it at EdSights, but whether it's a focus group, whether it's how during orientation, like maybe after the end of the first year experience, asking students what they wish they knew. Just I think understanding what are the top things that are getting in the way of our students being successful here and feeling prepared, and then using that as a way to prioritize kind of where the time, resources, and energy goes. Because with how much more higher ed is taking on, it's just not realistic for institutions to try to tackle everything at the same level at once. And so thinking about those kind of early college students, like what are the key things, engaging with them, whether it's, at EdSights, we're doing it when they start day one, but we also do it once they're accepted earlier, and understanding from them, like, what are your fears? What is making you nervous? And seeing what those trends are and starting there just as a way to be a bit more efficient.
Thank you, Carolina. And Representative Gray, you're someone at the State House, at the kind of public policy level. You're hearing and participating in dialogue around education, both at the higher education level and the K-12 level. Curious if you have any thoughts as to how colleges, like the institutions that are joining us today in terms of their leadership, can partner more effectively with K-12 systems in Alabama to improve college readiness, not just academically, but also including things like social and emotional success when students make their way onto campuses.
Yeah, one thing that I see that, not even from a lawmaking standpoint, but just like community standpoint, I've seen where local nonprofits have feeder programs into universities where they take 7th to 12th graders and they do mentoring and tutoring, and they give them these opportunities to go to different college campuses and learn about different things like engineering and these different skills and these different jobs that they may not even know exist. And so from a policy level, sometimes policy is always not the right way to go about doing things because there's still the application component. But I have seen on a just grassroots level how just universities and communities partnering with nonprofits could do the same thing.
And a lot of what you're saying, Representative Gray, fundamentally is getting at this idea that connectivity and belonging is really everything when it comes to having a successful experience. And what I want to kind of talk a little bit about is something that is often overlooked in questions about student success, and that's this concept of kind of student challenges and how things are just frankly different. Dr. King brought up earlier, this is not how many of us were as students. This is sort of a new era. So I want to bring you in, Dr. Wehlburg, on the idea here that when you listen to the underlying causes behind student challenges, what have you learned about first generation students in particular that may not have been on your radar or the radar of any peer of yours across the country or the state 10 years ago?
Well, certainly a lot has changed over time, and it's going to continue to change. I think that one of the things that we see our students coming in with a lot is that they are coming in with already learning experiences. They may have been in community colleges or in jobs or in other four-year institutions, but they're coming in already having a lot of good information. And one of the things that a lot of our students are saying is, I already know this. Why do I have to sit in that class? And I think that which is a great question to be asking. And so one of the things that we are working really hard to do is to build the credit for prior learning process. So that when a student is coming in, especially an adult learner is coming in, and they may have been a manager for 15 years, and they may have, certifications from industry. There are things that we can do to value and recognize the whole person that they are bringing with them, so that they can get credit for that prior learning in some way, and so they aren't sitting in classes where it's not. They're not learning something new, so that learning experience continues to be something that is engaging and exciting for the work that they are doing. That also cuts down on some of their costs if they're not having to pay for those credit hours, which is something that we're all looking at doing and reducing that barrier of cost for our students so that they are graduating with lower student debt levels. But that student learning that they are coming in with is something that we hear a lot from our students, and even from our first gen students who may not have started seeing that college was a pathway, and they've been working for a while, and now they're recognizing that, no, I really do need that credential, that degree, that next step. And so they're coming back to get it, but we're missing a huge population of students if we don't recognize that they are coming in with something that's valuable.
Thank you. And Dr. Gaede, I want to bring you in on that. On the first gen front in particular, curious what your observations have been kind of when you're building out an academic program, within the provost's office, but also just kind of observing on a day-to-day student concerns and how you respond perspective. Curious your experience on your campus.
Well, reflecting on this, we 10 years ago probably didn't know who our first generation students were, and we are still working to identify those and bring them in. We just had a woman who started her career in the 80s graduate last spring, and that was a celebration that was very exciting. It's just come to me that we in academia like to speak a strange language. Go to the bursar's office. What in the world is a bursar? What's a provost? Give people the language of how they can do what they need to do. And when they haven't had somebody who's been down that path to help guide them, we need to help guide them along that way and just give them the tools that they need.
Thank you, Dr. Gaede. You know, Dr. King and Representative Gray and Carolina, all kind of in various elements of answers and comments they've given to questions we've thrown out thus far, have brought up the idea of artificial intelligence, right? And it's sort of this hot button issue that pervades so much of what we do and discuss. But at the end of the day, for all the time that we spend talking about AI itself, at the highest level, students, really anybody in society, but we're focused on students here, they want problem solved, period. How the sausage is made doesn't much matter. So, what I want to kind of talk about here for a moment in the context of this artificial intelligence question is what is an example of technology being seamlessly integrated into the student experience that students kind of barely notice it's there, and how has that really helped improve processes in your campuses? Dr. Wehlburg, I'll start with you, seeing if you have any thoughts and comments on this one.
Well, yes, there's so many things that AI and is working to help us with behind the scenes. And that's changing every day with what comes out of that. One of the things that we are able to do now that we weren't a few years ago, or at least not as smoothly, is to use automated systems to better determine what a student needs in order to graduate and whether or not the student is in that right pathway. We have a lot of students come in and they think they want to major in one area, but yet they also have other options based on the courses that they bring in with them. So we're also able to go back through our systems and provide students with the credential that they earned, and they may not have even realized that they had gotten that minor or that other credential that they're able to, and we're able to provide to them because they took the classes that were needed to take. So I think that's one thing that we are able to do better is to bring in student transcripts and have those analyzed more quickly and more accurately, which is always better for students because we can give them answers a whole lot faster. And I did want to bring up one of the responses to the first question that you all asked to the audience about how when students thrive. Casey White said that they thrive when given less runaround as they seek answers to their questions. They don't live their lives by our org charts. And I think that is such an important thing to keep in mind. They may not know what a provost is or who a bursar is or who their advisor is or their dean is. But if we can really focus on what students are needing to have, and AI can help us identify problems sometimes before they exist.
Thank you, Dr. Wehlberg, and also want to give that shout out to Casey White at University of North Alabama. That's a great comment. Dr. Gaede, want to give you an opportunity to weigh here. Any examples of technology becoming really seamlessly integrated into the operations on your campus and has led to outcomes that have helped the student experience and driven progress?
Well, not directly related to AI, though we also have been doing some transcript evaluation, which I was going to mention. So that is something as it's particularly more and more important. we have very few students who don't have credit from some other institution. So finding the way those things plug in is really important to us these days. Um, one of the things we're working on here at UAH is an initiative, All In for Student Success, where we are putting together a student success platform to coordinate care among various units. So a student doesn't have to come tell their story once in financial aid and once to their advisor and once in whatever. So we can share notes and help support students in that way. I guess that's what I'd point out.
Thanks, Dr. Gaede. Carolina, I want to bring you in on this question of AI, and this is something you and I have talked a lot about. This kind of fundamental, and I might even say existential question of sort of AI, human beings, kind of where is the meeting point? Where is the alignment? Where is the partnership? Would love to kind of have you talk a little bit about your thoughts and maybe even more specifically your experience in working with campuses across the country about kind of that intersection and where the sort of nirvana and sweet spot lies in AI and human beings here.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question. I think it will be very clear in a couple of years what the answer is, but I think right now we're still in a place where it's a question. But I actually don't think it will be for too long. I think in the context of higher ed and the work that we all do, it's really about scaling our human impact. I think about Dr. King's example of that amazing employee that will now be running around high schools and supporting all these early college learners. And we need 100 of those, right? Like that is amazing. And I had never heard of a kind of a new role for that. I think that's incredible. And I think where AI can come in is just help that person almost like be the sidekick of those frontline workers that we need so badly, whether it's coaches, advisors, members of our care teams, admissions counselors. There's more and more expectations on these teams, but the teams are not growing. And so how do we make sure that they're spending that new person, for example, in at Jacksonville State, is focusing on the right students because it's only one of her, right? So she's going to have to figure out which students at each high school need that 30-minute or 1 hour conversation or that confidence boost or that help navigating college. And AI can really help kind of do the groundwork and identify the signals of which students the human should then intervene with and prioritize. And so I think it allows the humans to spend their time solving the problems, and you can let the AI kind of figure out who needs help, where the issues are, and where the human is needed so the humans can spend time on the things that matter most. And I think hopefully what we'll find, especially in student support type roles, is that's actually what our people signed up for in the first place. I don't think folks entered higher ed to do the more kind of transactional type work or answering FAQs. I think we all came into higher ed because of the mission and because we want to spend time with students and help them with those more kind of life happens types challenges. And AI is never going to be able to replace that, but it is going to be able to tell the human, hey, of your 400 students that you're responsible for, here are the 2 that you need to call today. So you're not kind of navigating that blindly. And so I think it can just point us in the right direction and in many ways elevate the bar on what it means to be human in the industries that we're in, which I think is a positive thing.
Thank you, Carolina. And Dr. King, I want to give you an
Yeah,
opportunity here. I know that
sure.
you have thoughts on this, given your purview and remit.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And Dr. Gaede, I think you said this about incorporating everything in like a care unit. We've been doing that, coordinated care units for quite a few years. Um, and what we do is, we use Navigate 360, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, for predictive analytics and appointment campaigns, all that kind of stuff, and alerts. We use the EdSights for student perceived risk. And then we also use Ragas EDU Integrate from UAH. And all 3 of these come together to give us a picture of that student without that student having to go all different places, without us hearing about it from all different places. And if you're not familiar with Ragas EDU, basically integrate as their product. It tells us what grade a student has in the class and how many assignments they've completed out of the semester. And when they tell us they've completed all their assignments and we say, no, you haven't, then we're looking at EdSights and we're saying, well, I wonder what the students' perceived, self-perceived risk drivers are. And then we compare that with the Navigate and we have a full picture and we haven't had to do anything. So that way we are not wasting time trying to figure out how we need to help them. And it's been very beneficial to blend all these things together for us. It helps us save time. It helps us direct students to the types of resources they need when they need it. And I just can't say enough about all three of those products. They work together. I know Carolina is very familiar with our Navigate administrator. She's, just fantastic. But that's how we use AI. Now, AI, as others have mentioned, is also being used in the registrar's office for transcript reviews. We're introducing it now in admissions. I'm not as familiar with what they're doing. And then there's a specter of how do we teach students to use AI appropriately? And that's where the faculty come in. Each year, my department, the Student Success Center, we put on a Student Success Summit. And next year in 2027, it's going to be about AI. And I'm not quite sure exactly where we're going with it yet, but that's what the provost wants. And so that's what we're going to be doing. But we will invite the state to attend, like we did last year. We had a few people from UAH come and present. But anyway, that's how we use it, and I think it's going to be imperative moving forward for anyone who's in higher ed to start manipulating AI to that end, so students aren't lost in the shuffle.
Thank you, Dr. King. And Representative Gray, on this topic, right, this is something where I know you have no doubt done thinking both with colleagues in state and with peers and colleagues across the country. As policymakers think about AI in education and really AI more broadly, how do someone like yourself think about encouraging the sort of innovation and constituent services, really, for lack of a better term, that Dr. King outlines while ensuring students' privacy, trust, and safety? It's something that, is obviously that thorny question. And that's one of the reasons we're grateful to have someone like you as part of today's discussion.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think as lawmakers, you shouldn't stop innovation. So I don't think it's about stopping the innovation. I do think it's about creating those guardrails that you're talking about, meaning protecting the data, being transparent about how AI is used, making sure that there's human oversight and that we're not using algorithms to determine, you know, someone that if you're looking at something from a component of having empathy, right? AI can't do that, right? So there's human elements that need to be the AI as well. And we should ask ourselves this question: can AI do this, or should AI do this? And then kind of to talk about what Dr. King was saying as far as students being able to use it effectively. I think we also need to kind of start in K through 12 with AI literacy, teaching, students how to prompt, how to safely use AI so that when they get on the college level, they can use it effectively as well. And so, there's no, I guess, wrong or right answer. And someone like Alabama kind of been like hesitant to do anything around framework, regulatory things or guardrails. But I do think when we look at it from just what should AI do and what it can do, I think we need to look at that from a policy standpoint.
Thank you, Representative Gray. And something that has been a consistent theme really this afternoon in our conversation, whether it was Dr. Wehlburg and Dr. Gaede talking about kind of course registration and degree completion, whether it was Dr. King talking about sort of understanding how we support students using various technology platforms, that's all really fundamentally laddering up to this idea of data and measurement. Colleges have traditionally measured graduation and retention rates. I'm curious to ask our panel here, is there another indicator that you think institutions may want to consider measuring they're not necessarily formally tracking today? Dr. Wehlburg, we'll start with you on that question.
Oh my goodness. There are, I think, a lot of the metrics that we have historically used actually are restricting some of what we do, because if the idea is degree attainment and completion of a degree, well, what do you do with all the micro credentials that students are coming back for, and how do you look at that lifelong learning piece of that? So I think that we do need to develop new metrics to better get a handle on what students are gaining from what happens, and I know that some of the things that are happening in the state of Alabama is a focus on career and job attainment of graduates, and there's also a desire to look at salary levels, and this is both at the state level and at the national level. Is if someone is leaving a degree program or a certificate program, are they able to get a job in that area, and are they making more than someone who didn't go through that particular program to do that? And I think that's a really interesting metric to use with that. I will also say that shouldn't be used in by itself, because there are many of our degree programs and plans that don't necessarily go into a high-paying job, but that doesn't make them any less valuable as career options. And sometimes it takes a long time for somebody after they get out of a degree program to work their way up through whatever kind of promotion system is in there. So I think that I don't know that I have a good answer for what should those metrics be, but I do know that we need to be having more conversations about that question in terms of what would those metrics be that are most valuable, and how can we use them equitably and fairly to look at success of institutions. So that's a non-answer right there. Is I don't know what the answer to that should be.
Well, let's see. Dr. Gaede, do you?
No, I don't. But I want to piggyback something that Dr. King said about engagement. One of my thoughts is we have toyed with the idea of doing co-curricular transcripts or co-curricular engagements. I think some of the things that we learn, if I look back at my collegiate career, I learned a lot from the student organizations that I was involved in, and a lot of those have given me some skills to be involved in the workplace. And yes, this is a difficult problem, how to quantify all these things, but that's just one of the reflections I had when thinking about this question.
Dr. King, your thoughts on here. What else should we be measuring, especially as someone whose day-to-day is living and breathing student support? Love to hear your thoughts here if you got anything.
Well, I can tell you what we're attempting to do. And it's directly related to that. What we're hearing from employers is they don't only care about the degree, they want someone who is demonstrating skills and readiness to work. So, so basically, I'm gonna go a long way around to get to what I'm trying to say. And this is true for my children. I have three, and my last one graduates at the end of this month, thank goodness. But none of them ever went to the career center. None, not a single one of them ever did. Two of my sons are in cybersecurity. By the time they graduated, their degree was basically useless because they had to keep up with all these, whatever they do in cybersecurity, certifications to make sure that, things are, and you know, Dr. Gaede, what I'm talking about at UAH, it's just that type of degree. You have to keep up with stuff. So what we're trying to do is force students into things that they may not want to do because they're just not thinking about it. So you build going to the career fair for your particular major into a class as an assignment. And we've worked that out with several different programs that are doing that now, and others are like catching on. And from there, they're hearing from the employers the types of metrics basically that employers are looking for the time that they get out of school. There is a heavy push right now uh, at Jack State with high impact practices, internships, doesn't matter what your degree is. My undergraduate degree is in philosophy. Yeah, I mean, and it's like, what do you do with that? Open a philosophy shop? That's what someone asked me one time. Say, no, there's a lot of things you can do. I know how to think and I know how to write. If we can get everyone who graduates from a 4-year institution, 2-year institution, if they can think critically and write and work in a group, they are going to go a long way. And these are the things that employers are looking for. So, getting back to the question, how do we measure this? We have to keep up with it through our partnerships with faculty and the participation at these events at careers through the Student Success Center and our conversations with employers, and we adjust as we move through this whole process. This goes back to what I said earlier about there are best practices that work everywhere, and then there are organic types of things you do on your campus because that's what your students need. Jack State has always been like the teacher school. You produce more teachers than any other university in Alabama. Well, that used to be the case. I don't think it is anymore. We're producing all kinds of things, nurses, business school, you name it. So we have to be willing to measure those things to make sure we are providing the outcomes that those employers, and I can't tell you how difficult this is for me to say, because like Representative Gray mentioned about liberal arts, I had a classical education, and I think that's very important. I'm talking Greek, Latin. I mean, I had a whole class on just Socrates. I mean, just stuff like that. I think is important, but we have to adjust with the times and make sure our students have those opportunities. Does that answer your
Thank you.
question, Jordan?
It does. It does. And I think more than anything, right, it's this idea that the experience is frankly what students take forward with them. And that's, a good segue into, and I got to hustle here because we're running out of time because this discussion has been really rich in a great way. A couple of things I want to make sure we get to before we go. Dr. King, in terms of that concept of needing the experience to be something that stays with students and has an impact, I want to kind of go back in a little bit of a time machine here and give you each just a very quick couple of seconds here. What is something you remember about your own undergraduate experience that stands out in a positive way? Representative Gray, and I know you're an Auburn guy, so don't mean to like drudge up any rivalries here, but want to bring you on in this first about your own undergrad experience. What do you think of positively?
Yeah, I'm an Auburn guy, but I went to North Carolina State to play football there. So, my experience probably way different than a lot of other people. But I will say that being someone that came from like a small town and I went to Raleigh, North Carolina, I felt community, I felt diversity, I felt culture. I felt that I could think outside of the box and just be more than what my community told me I could be, right? And so I think that was the experience that I kind of got from my college experience because that's something that I can remember. I think about it, the diversity, the different religions, all the things that make up this melting pot that you call the United States, and that is the experience that I got in college.
Thank you so much. Dr. Gaede, we'll go to you. Your own undergraduate experience. What was really positive that you think back on?
Well, I was a co-op student as an engineering student and was able to work while I also was able to live on campus. And if they ever made me queen, I would make everybody a co-op student. I just think it's a tremendous experience.
Dr. Wehlburg, you're a university president now. You kind of run the show on your campus. Obviously, I would think at least your undergraduate experience probably instilled in you a desire to reinvest and reengage. Share something with us.
Well, one of the things that is one of my favorite pieces of my undergraduate degree was I was in the marching band at the University of Florida, and even at a large institution, I had a kind of an existing friend group, and I think those student organizations and the connections that you make and the relationships that you build can really help make the learning experience even more important. And sometimes that's what keeps students engaged, is not necessarily always the classwork, even though that's a really important piece, but sometimes it's a relationship with others. And so that's part of what I most appreciate for my undergraduate time.
What instruments did you play in the marching band at UF?
French horn. So I played mellophone.
Okay.
And I just have to
Carolina.
say, go Gators. I know.
Yeah.
Gotta say it.
All right. Carolina, obviously your undergraduate experience on some level played a role in you devoting yourself to being engaged in the higher education space nationally. Share with us something about your experience that stands out in a positive way.
Yeah, so I was trying to think about this. I think, well, for those of you who don't know, I moved to the States basically a week before my first year of college. So when I talk about higher ed representing a lot more than kind of what you learn in the classroom, I think that's a good example. So for me, college was just a lot more than earning a degree. It was my kind of launch into the US, and it was my introduction to life in this new continent and everything that comes with it. And it taught me kind of the foundations of everything that I need today to be an adult and a responsible citizen in this country. And so yeah, for me it was really kind of an introduction to a new life. And higher ed and my college experience allowed me to explore that and kind of ease into that in a way that was a lot more familiar, comfortable, and supportive than if I had just, moved to the States in a different context. And so yeah, I think it was what it represented. And I always share the story when I first moved, my first day, they left Target open until 10 p.m. for college students to be able to buy dorm supplies. And I asked my roommate at the time if Target was a bar or a restaurant, if I had to dress up for it, because I had no idea what Target was. I had never heard of it in my life. As I didn't know, what a GPA was or what an advisor was. So that just kind of gives you a clue of how clueless I was and how much of an impact higher ed had on me.
That's great. Final exit question here. I'm going to put you, Dr. Wehlburg, on the spot. If a new president just got a job as president and called you up on the phone and said, I have funding to improve just one thing related to the student success experience this year, what would you tell them to invest in?
Success coaches and career coaches and the support structures that we can provide to students from day one.
Thank you. Well, literally hitting the buzzer here. This was a fantastic conversation today, really focused on what makes Alabama unique and some of the great institutions and people that are hard at work to deliver for our students. Want to just give a huge thanks to our audience for joining us. Want to give a huge thanks to our panelists, Representative Jeremy Gray of the legislature, Dr. Tim King of Jacksonville State, Dr. Rhonda Gaede from UAlabama Huntsville, Dr. Catherine Wehlburg, who leads Athens State University, and of course, EdSights co-founder and co-CEO, Carolina Recchi. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Please look out for more information from EdSights about future gatherings like this. Wishing everyone a great rest of the afternoon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.